Good evening. I'm Detective James Miller with the State Bureau of Investigation's Special Cases Division. For 32 years, I've documented unexplained phenomena across America's heartland. Some cases can be explained away by science, psychology, or simple human deception. Others defy conventional explanation. Tonight, I'm sharing details from one of Michigan's most persistent cases, a file that's been open in one form or another for nearly a century. Case file: Michigan 1926-078. Date of initial report: March 28, 1926. Status: unexplained. If you have a story, drop a comment below and subscribe to the channel. The Masonic Temple of Detroit. This massive Neo-Gothic structure stands at 500 Temple Street in Detroit's Cass Corridor. Completed in 1926, it remains the largest Masonic temple in the world. 14 stories tall, with over 1,000 rooms, including multiple theaters, ballrooms, and a labyrinth of corridors that even longtime members claim to get lost in. But what interests my department isn't the building's architectural significance. It's what reportedly happened during its construction, and what continues to happen within its walls to this day. The temple was designed by architect George D. Mason, a prominent Detroit figure responsible for many of the city's iconic structures. But the Masonic Temple was to be his masterpiece, a monument to Freemasonry and his own legacy. Construction began in 1920, with costs initially estimated at around $2.5 million, an astronomical sum for the time. But as work progressed, the budget spiraled. Additional features were added, materials became more expensive, and delays mounted. By 1926, Mason had invested virtually everything he owned into completing the project. The official record states that George Mason died in 1948 at the age of 91, after a long and distinguished career. But that's not the story that persists among those who work in and visit the temple. According to local legend, Mason was financially ruined by the temple's construction. In despair, he climbed to the roof of his masterpiece and jumped to his death. A dramatic story, but one that's easily dismissed as urban legend. At least, that's what I thought when this file first crossed my desk in 1992. The SBI became involved after a pattern emerged. Dozens of reports over decades describing unexplained phenomena within the temple. Maintenance workers, event staff, performers, and visitors described identical experiences, often without knowledge of previous incidents. Let's start with what we know for certain. On March 17, 1926, just weeks before the temple's official dedication, night watchman Harold Winters made an unusual entry in his logbook. I'll quote directly. 2:15 a.m. Heard footsteps on the roof. Investigated all accessible areas. Found nothing. Footsteps continued for approximately 10 minutes, moving from east to west across the roof's edge. No maintenance scheduled. No access points unlocked. Temperature outside 28 degrees with heavy snowfall. This is the first documented report of what would become a recurring phenomenon. Over the next 9 decades, similar incidents would be reported by dozens of witnesses. Footsteps pacing the roof, particularly during inclement weather. Always moving in the same pattern. But that's just the beginning. In October 1938, theater manager William Carson filed this report with Detroit police. During final rehearsals for our production of Macbeth, the grand chandelier in the main theater began to swing violently, despite no drafts or movement in the building. It continued for approximately 3 minutes before stopping abruptly. Engineering inspection found no mechanical explanation. 3 staff members resigned following the incident. The police dismissed the report as a publicity stunt for the notoriously cursed play. but similar incidents with the chandeliers were reported in 1952, 1967, 1984, and most recently in 2019. What makes this case particularly interesting is the consistency of the phenomena and their apparent connection to financial matters. Reports typically spike during periods when the temple faces financial difficulty. During the Great Depression, the 1970s recession, and most recently during Detroit's bankruptcy proceedings. In April 1967, building superintendent Thomas Larkin documented finding the temple's accounting office in disarray 3 mornings in a row. In his maintenance log, he wrote, "Books and ledgers thrown from shelves again, door locked, alarm set, no signs of entry. Security footage shows nothing entering room, yet at 3:17 a.m., books begin flying from shelves. Oddly, only financial records are disturbed." I interviewed Larkin myself in 1996, shortly before his death. He maintained until the end that there was no rational explanation for what he witnessed. In 2001, our department conducted a formal investigation after a wedding reception ended abruptly, when all 3 chandeliers in the crystal ballroom began swinging in perfect synchronization. The bride's father, a structural engineer, insisted on a professional examination, believing the building might be unsound. I led that investigation personally. We found no structural issues, no seismic activity, no air current patterns that could explain the movement. What we did discover were temperature anomalies. Consistent cold spots measuring 15-20 degrees below ambient temperature, always in the same locations throughout the building. These cold spots correspond precisely to areas where witnesses report seeing a tall, distinguished-looking man in early 20th century formal attire, often described as carrying drafting tools or architectural plans. I'm going to share some witness testimonies, starting with Diane Mercer, a caterer who worked events at the temple from 1988 to 2007. It was always the same. If we were shortchanging guests, using cheaper ingredients than they paid for, or serving fewer appetizers than contracted, something would happen. Trays would flip inexplicably. Wine glasses would shatter. Once, all the lights in the crystal ballroom flashed on and off repeatedly until my boss agreed to bring out the premium entrees the client had actually paid for. James Holden, security guard, employed 2005-2020. The elevator would go to the top floor on its own, always at night, always around 3 a.m. Engineering checked it dozens of times, found nothing wrong with the mechanism. What really got to me was that it only happened when the temple was behind on paying vendors. Like someone was checking the books. Rebecca Torres, event coordinator, 2010. Present. I've worked in 6 allegedly haunted venues across Michigan. This is different. Whatever is in the Masonic Temple doesn't try to scare people. It's more like, it's ensuring fairness. Financial fairness. I once watched a contractor try to build a temple for work they never completed. The invoice literally burst into flames on my desk. No source of ignition. Nothing. Just spontaneous combustion. We later discovered the company had billed us for premium materials, but used substandard ones. The most compelling account comes from Matthew Davis, the temple's financial controller from 2012 to 2018. During Detroit's bankruptcy, the temple itself faced foreclosure due to unpaid taxes totaling over $150,000. Davis was working late one night, trying to find funds to save the building. Here's his statement, recorded in 2018. I was alone, going through old financial records, looking for any assets we might have missed. Around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps above me. Then the temperature dropped dramatically. I could see my breath. All the papers on my desk flew into the air, then settled in a different arrangement. When I looked, they'd organized themselves to highlight a forgotten account, an investment made in the 1960s that had matured but never been claimed. It was enough to pay the tax bill and keep the temple from foreclosure. As I was processing this, I distinctly heard a man's voice say, "I won't let them take it." When I looked up, I saw him, tall, distinguished, in an old-fashioned suit. He was partially transparent, but I could clearly see he was holding architectural drawings. He nodded at me once, then faded away. 1 week after Davis discovered that forgotten account, an anonymous donor contributed the exact remaining amount needed to clear all debts on the building. Our department conducted a thorough investigation in 2019, utilizing the most advanced equipment available to us. I'll summarize our findings. 1. Consistent cold spots throughout the building, defying thermal explanation. 2. Audio recordings capturing footsteps and occasional whispers, primarily on the upper floors and roof. 3. Electromagnetic anomalies that coincide with reported phenomena. 4. Motion sensors triggered when no visible presence was detected. 5. 5 distinct photographic anomalies showing what appears to be a partial manifestation of a human figure. What we didn't find was any evidence of hoax, structural issues, or psychological mass suggestion. While I maintain scientific skepticism, this case challenges conventional explanation. Is the Masonic Temple of Detroit haunted by its architect? The historical record clearly shows that George Mason did not leap to his death from the temple roof. He lived another 22 years after the building's completion. But there's an interesting footnote to history here. Mason did indeed suffer financial hardship related to the temple's construction. He invested heavily in the project, and the final costs, over $7 million, nearly triple the original estimate, strained his resources significantly. While he didn't die penniless as legend suggests, the temple did represent a financial turning point in his career. Historical records indicate that Mason expressed tremendous pride in the temple, reportedly stating, "This building will be my legacy. I would give everything to ensure it stands for generations." Perhaps in some way, he still is. The Masonic Temple remains one of Detroit's iconic landmarks. It continues to host concerts, theater productions, and events. Most visitors never experience anything unusual. But ask the staff who work there night after night, and you'll hear a consistent refrain. The architect is still watching over his building. What makes this case particularly compelling isn't the typical haunting behaviors. No one reports malevolent activity, threatening presences, or harmful occurrences. Instead, the phenomena consistently relate to financial matters and the building's preservation. Could a man's dedication to his greatest work somehow transcend death itself? Is it possible that George Mason's fierce pride in his masterpiece created some kind of psychic imprint? Or is there a more conventional explanation we've simply failed to discover? Case Michigan 1926-078 remains open. The phenomena continue to be reported, though less frequently in recent years as the temple's financial situation has stabilized. Whatever presence watches over the Masonic Temple seems content when the building is well maintained and financially sound. I've investigated hundreds of allegedly haunted locations across America. Most can be explained by natural phenomena, structural quirks, or human psychology. The Masonic Temple stands apart. Consistent reports over nearly a century, multiple credible witnesses, and phenomena that defy conventional explanation. Is it proof of life after death? I can't make that claim. But I can tell you this. Something unusual continues to occur in that magnificent building on Temple Street. And whatever it is It seems determined that George Mason's masterpiece will stand for generations to come, just as he intended. Personal notes. After 32 years investigating paranormal phenomena, I've developed a theory about certain locations. Some buildings seem to absorb the intense emotions or intentions of those most connected to them. The Masonic Temple represents George Mason's life work, his crowning achievement, and greatest financial gamble. If any emotional imprint could transcend death, this would be a prime candidate. What's particularly interesting is how the phenomena relate specifically to financial matters and the building's preservation, rather than generic haunting behaviors. This suggests not a conscious entity, but an echo of Mason's specific concerns. Evidence log, 27 witness statements, 1926-2023. 14 maintenance records documenting unexplained occurrences. 8 security footage anomalies. 5 photographs showing partial manifestations or light anomalies. 3 audio recordings of unexplained footsteps and whispers. Thermal imaging showing consistent cold spots throughout building. EMF readings significantly above baseline in specific locations. Case status update. Case remains unexplained. Phenomena continue to be reported approximately 3 to 4 times annually, primarily during periods of financial strain, or when maintenance issues threaten the building's integrity. No malevolent activity reported. All phenomena appear directed toward preservation of the structure and financial propriety. Recommend continued monitoring, but no active intervention.